phantom. I wasn't supposed to stop in Harlows Field. Welcome to Harlows Field, population 312. That's the part I keep coming back to. Every time I replay it in my head, every sleepless night, every moment of quiet panic, that fact stands out like a warning sign I chose to ignore. I was just passing through. That's what everyone says before a place decides to keep them. I'd been driving west for nearly 8 hours, the kind of drive where the radio gives up before you do. Static swallowed the stations one by one until all I had left was the hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing. The road narrowed somewhere after the last gas station. The pavement cracked, the lines faded, and the land flattened into a wide, open stretch of farmland that seemed to go on forever. Cornfields mostly, tall, dry, motionless. No wind. That should have been the first sign something was wrong. Even in the middle of nowhere, there's always wind, always something moving. But the fields around Harlows Field stood perfectly still, like a photograph that forgot to change. The sun was sinking low, turning the sky a sickly orange. I checked my GPS. No signal. The screen flickered, spun, then froze. And then the engine sputtered. Once, twice. Dead. I coasted to the side of the road, gravel crunching under the tires, and sat there with my hands still on the wheel, heart pounding like it had somewhere urgent to be. Silence flooded in. Not peaceful silence, heavy silence. The kind that presses against your ears until you're painfully aware of your own thoughts. I stepped out of the car and the smell hit me immediately. Dry earth, old plants, something faintly metallic underneath it all. The road stretched empty in both directions. No cars, no birds, no insects. That's when I noticed the sign. A wooden post leaned crookedly out of the soil across the road, half hidden by weeds, white paint peeling badly. I don't know why I walked toward it. I should have stayed with the car, but the moment I stepped off the road and onto the dirt path leading toward the village, something in my chest loosened, like the place had recognized me, like it had been waiting. Harlows Field sat low in the land, buildings clustered together as if huddling for warmth. Wooden houses, a small church with a bell tower, one general store, one bar. All of it bathed in the dying light of the sun, and every window was lit, too lit. Lamps burned behind every curtain, porch lights glared white and harsh. Not warm, not welcoming, overlit, like the village was afraid of the dark. As I walked down the main road, I realized something else. Every light was exactly the same brightness, same color, same intensity. No shadows. That's not how light works. I reached the center of town just as the sun disappeared completely. The sky darkened instantly, unnaturally fast, and the lamps seemed to flare brighter in response. That's when the people came out. Doors opened in near unison. Men, women, old, young. They stepped onto porches, sidewalks, dirt paths, all turning to look at me at the same time. No one spoke. Their eyes were red, bloodshot, wide, like they hadn't slept in weeks. I raised a hand, feeling stupid. My car broke down." No response. They just stared. And then, slowly, one man stepped forward from the crowd, late 50s maybe, weathered face, straw hat clenched tightly in both hands. "You shouldn't be here." His voice shook, not with anger, with exhaustion. I don't remember agreeing to stay the night, but somehow, by the time the church bell rang once, loud enough for me to flinch, I was being led toward a small guest room above the general store. The owner, Mrs. Calder, avoided my eyes as she handed me a key. "Don't turn the lights off," she quieted. "What?" She swallowed. "Just don't." That night, lying in a narrow bed under a single flickering bulb, I listened to the sound of the village breathing. Soft footsteps outside, murmurs behind walls, and, beneath it all, a faint rustling, like dry plants being touched by unseen hands. The fields were awake, and somehow, deep down, I knew. They already knew my name.
I didn't sleep. I don't mean that in the poetic sense, tossing, turning, drifting in and out of half dreams. I mean my eyes never closed, not once. The light in the room wouldn't let them. It buzzed faintly, a soft electrical hum that crawled into my skull and settled there. Every time I blinked, the bulb seemed brighter when my eyes opened again, as if it resented the interruption. I lay there staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster until they started to look like maps, rivers, borders, shapes that suggested places I didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar. Outside, the rustling continued. Not wind, never wind. It was the sound of dry stalks being brushed aside carefully, deliberately, like something large moving slowly through the fields, taking its time. At some point, I couldn't tell you when, the footsteps started. Soft, measured, passing beneath my window. Back and forth, always stopping directly below me. I held my breath, listening for voices. There were none, just breathing. Dozens of breaths, in and out, patient, waiting. Morning arrived without warning. There was no sunrise, no gradual lightening of the sky. The night simply stopped. One moment the world outside the window was black, the next it was washed in the same harsh white glow as the lamps, only now the light came from everywhere at once. Shadowless, flat. I sat up, joints stiff, head pounding. When I looked at the clock on the wall, my stomach dropped. 6 a.m. exactly. Not 6:01, not blinking, not ticking. The second hand was frozen. I stood, crossed the room, and flipped the light switch off. Nothing happened. The bulb continued to blaze. Mrs. Calder's words echoed in my head. "Don't turn the lights off." I left the room. The general store below smelled like dust and old paper. Shelves were lined with canned goods, most of them unlabeled. No prices, no brands, just metal and glass. Mrs. Calder stood behind the counter, already watching me when I came down the stairs. "You're awake." I never slept. She nodded, as if that confirmed something she already knew. "You'll get used to it." That's not reassuring. She didn't smile. "We don't sleep much here." I noticed her eyes then, bloodshot, veins dark and thick like cracks spreading from the corners. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee into a chipped mug and slid it toward me. I took a sip. It tasted wrong. Bitter, yes, but also metallic, like the smell outside after rain that never comes. Is there a phone? No service. Internet. She hooked her head. Road out of town? Her hand froze on the counter. For the first time, she looked me directly. You can try, she said quietly. The village was fully awake. Every person I'd seen the night before was out again, moving through their routines with eerie precision, sweeping porches that were already clean, rearranging items in shop windows that no one seemed to shop in, standing in small groups, talking in whispers that stopped the moment I passed. Their eyes followed me everywhere. I headed toward the edge of town, where the road curved back toward the highway. As I walked, the rustling grew louder, closer. The fields pressed in on both sides, corn standing impossibly tall now, leaves dry and sharp, brushing against each other without moving. I reached the curve and stopped. The road was gone. Not blocked, not damaged. Gone. In its place stood more field, rows of corn stretching out where asphalt should have been, as if the land had simply decided the road had never existed. I turned around slowly. The village was still there, calm, waiting. Behind me, the fields whispered. Not words. Memory.
I didn't run back. I walked, carefully, like someone returning to a place they'd always belonged, even if they hated it. At the church, the bell rang again, once, sharp enough to rattle my teeth. People began to gather. Inside, wooden pews creaked under the weight of the village. The air smelled like old varnish and something sweet underneath it, decay dressed up as comfort. A man stood at the pulpit, tall, gaunt, younger than I expected. He smiled when he saw me. "You're early," he said. "I'm not staying," I replied. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The man tilted his head. No one does at first. "What is this place?" He considered that, then gestured around him. "This is where we remember." The lights overhead flickered, but did not dim. "You see," he continued, "sleep lets things fade. Dreams blur edges. We don't allow that here." "Allow what?" "Forgetting." After the gathering, if you could call it that, I noticed something new. Everyone carried notebooks, small, worn, filled edge to edge with frantic handwriting. I watched a woman sit on her porch, scribbling furiously, stopping only to cross out a name with such force the paper tore. Another man stood in the street, reading his notebook aloud under his breath, like a prayer. I stopped one of them, a teenager, no more than 16, eyes ringed black with exhaustion. "What are those?" I asked. He hesitated, then handed it to me. Inside were names. Hundreds. Some crossed out, some circled, some written again and again on different pages. "What happens when you forget someone?" I asked. His lip trembled. "They come back wrong." That night, the footsteps returned, but this time I heard something else. My name, softly, repeated, from the fields, not spoken, remembered. And for the first time since arriving in Harlows Field, I understood the truth. The village wasn't trapping people. It was holding on to them, so they wouldn't disappear, like everything else that wandered too close to the fields.
By the third day, or what I believed was the third day, I stopped trusting time. The clocks never moved, not in my room, not in the store, not in the church. Every single one read 6 o'clock. Morning, night, it didn't matter. The light never changed, so time had nothing to anchor itself to. Sleep became a rumor. My body begged for it in waves, heavy eyelids, aching joints, thoughts slowing like syrup. But the moment I lay down, the buzzing light pulled me back, wide awake, heart racing. I started to forget small things first. Where I put the key, what I'd eaten, the sound of my own voice when I wasn't speaking. At first, I thought it was exhaustion. Then I noticed the notebook on my bedside table. I didn't remember buying it. The cover was brown, cracked leather. My name was written on the first page, not in my handwriting. I carried it with me everywhere after that. The villagers nodded approvingly when they saw it, as if I'd finally understood a rule no one had bothered explaining. Mrs. Calder glanced at it once while pouring coffee. "Good," she said. "You're learning." "What happens if I don't write?" I asked. She hesitated longer than usual. "Then the fields will." I began with facts. My full name, where I was born, my parents' names. I wrote carefully, slowly, afraid that if I rushed, the words might slide away from me. Every few minutes I reread what I'd written, checking for gaps. That was when I noticed the ink fading. Not all of it, just certain lines, certain names. My father's middle name blurred first, the letters thinning until they looked like ghosts of themselves. I pressed the pen harder, rewriting it, carving the words into the paper. The page tore. Outside, the rustling grew louder. The fields were closer. I don't mean physically, though the corn did seem to lean inward, rows subtly rearranging themselves, but in some other way. A pressure behind my eyes, a tug in my chest whenever I tried to think about my life before Harlows Field. Faces came to me without names, voices without context, memories stripped of emotion. I watched the villagers constantly now. They moved with increasing urgency, writing whenever they had a free moment. Some carried multiple notebooks, flipping between them frantically. One man dropped his in the street. The reaction was immediate. 3 people rushed to help him, scooping the book off the ground as if it were a wounded animal. He collapsed to his knees, sobbing, whispering apologies to the dirt. "Don't let it read me," he begged. No one answered. I followed the sound one night, the rustling.
I didn't plan to. My feet just carried me. Past the last house, past the edge of the lamplight, into the fields. The light followed, not from any visible source, but enough to see the rows ahead of me, stretching endlessly, identical in every direction. The air was thick here, heavy. Each breath felt borrowed. That's when I heard it clearly for the first time. Not my name, my voice, repeating things I'd forgotten. My childhood address, the name of my first pet, a memory of laughing in a place I couldn't picture anymore. "Stop," I whispered. The fields rustled in response, amused. I stumbled back into town just before the bell rang. The villagers were already gathering, notebooks clutched tight, faces more gaunt than the day before. The man at the pulpit watched me closely. "You went too far," he said. "I needed answers. You needed rest. There is no rest here." His smile was thin. "Exactly." That night, I added a new section to my notebook. Things the fields take first. Sleep, time, maims. I underlined the last one so hard the pen bled through the page. And beneath it, without remembering when I'd written it, was another line. "Next is the face." I realized I was losing my face when I stopped recognizing myself. It happened in the general store bathroom, a small room at the back, lit like everything else, too bright, too clean. The mirror bolted directly into the wall as if someone had once tried to remove it and failed. I leaned over the sink, splashed water on my cheeks, and looked up. The man staring back at me was close. Close enough that I knew he was supposed to be me. But something was wrong with the proportions. The eyes were set just a fraction too far apart. The nose looked unfamiliar, as if it belonged to a relative I'd only seen in old photographs. My mouth moved when I spoke, but the shape of it didn't feel earned. I raised a hand. He did the same. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. I flipped open my notebook right there, water dripping onto the pages. My face. Brown eyes, scar above left eyebrow. I touched my brow. No scar. My breath hitched. I searched the mirror again, closer now until my nose nearly touched the glass. The skin looked unfinished, like clay smoothed over a mold that hadn't quite set. Someone knocked on the door. "Don't stay in there too long," Mrs. Calder called. "Mirrors confuse things." I stumbled out, heart racing. "Confuse what?" I asked. She didn't answer. That afternoon, a man disappeared. No alarm, no scream, just absence. His name was, or had been, Eli Turner. I knew that because I'd written it down after hearing it repeated enough times to feel important. The space where his house stood was empty by evening. Not ruined, not collapsed. Empty, as if it had never been there. The villagers gathered at the edge of the lot, notebooks open, flipping pages in frantic unison. "What happens now?" I asked the teenager, the same one who'd shown me his notebook before. He didn't look at me. "We write faster," he said.
The bell rang 3 times that night. That had never happened before. The church filled quickly, fear moving through the crowd like an infection. The man at the pulpit looked tired, older, his hair thinner than it had been yesterday. "We are forgetting again," he said. A murmur rose. "No," someone whispered, "not again." The man's eyes found me. "This one has not learned his limits." Every head turned. I wanted to argue, to deny it, but the truth pressed against my skull. I had stopped writing certain things down. Not intentionally, just forgetting to. "We gave you shelter, light, memory, time. What have you given me?" I asked. He smiled sadly. "Wait." That night, the fields came closer than ever. I woke, though I don't remember falling asleep, to the sound of my notebook flipping open on its own. Pages turned slowly, deliberately, stopping at random entries. Names faded as I watched. Not at once, letter by letter. I grabbed the book, clutched it to my chest, and ran. Out of the store, down the street, toward the edge of town. The light followed me. Behind me, the rustling roared. I stopped when I reached the field's edge. Something stood there. Not a person, a shape, roughly human in outline, formed entirely of stalks and leaves, bending and shifting as if struggling to remember what it was supposed to be. It tilted its head and spoke, in my voice. "You forgot me," it said. I screamed. The villagers pulled me back before I could step into the rows. Hands gripped my arms, my shoulders, my neck. Not violent, desperate. "Don't let it finish you," someone cried. Back in my room, shaking, I opened my notebook again. A new page had been added, in my handwriting, but I did not remember writing it. "The fields are not taking us. We are leaving parts of ourselves behind." I looked up at the mirror on the wall. For a moment, just a moment, the face staring back at me belonged to someone else entirely. After that night, no one pretended anymore. The smiles disappeared, the careful avoidance, the half-truths wrapped in politeness. Harlows Field was done lying to me, and maybe I was done lying to myself. The notebooks grew thicker. New bindings appeared overnight, stitched from fabric I didn't recognize, paper rougher than before, edges uneven. When I asked Mrs. Calder where they came from, she stared at the shelves behind her for a long time before answering. "We make room," she said. "For what?" She met my eyes. "For what's left." I stopped trying to find my way out. That sounds like surrender. Maybe it was, but every time I even thought about leaving, my head filled with static, memories scattering like birds, names dissolving before I could grab them. Instead, I watched, I listened, and slowly the village began to speak. Harlows Field hadn't always been like this. They told me in pieces, fragmented between long silences and hurried writing sessions, always under the light, never near the fields. There had been a drought, years ago, long before I arrived, long before the clock stopped. The crops failed first, then the animals,
Then people began forgetting things, small things at first, like birthdays, directions, the names of distant relatives. Sleep grew restless, dreams turned thin. That was when the fields started answering. The first memory they gave was a child, not taken, given. They didn't use that word often, but when they did, it carried weight. A girl wandered into the corn during a storm and never came back. By morning, the crops stood taller, greener, healthier, and the villagers slept for one night. They tried to leave after that, packed cars, loaded trucks. The road bent, the fields followed. So they made a choice, not to feed the fields' bodies, but selves, names, faces, sleep, time, the things that made a person whole. The fields didn't want flesh, they wanted to be remembered.
I understood then why the light never went out. Darkness lets memory soften, blur, fade. Light keeps everything sharp, painfully so. The man at the pulpit, his name was Aaron, I learned, writing it down 3 times to make sure it stayed, invited me to walk with him to the edge of town. Not into the fields, never into the fields. He looked older now, his face thinner, his eyes ringed with deep shadows that no amount of light could erase. "We survive by subtraction," he said, carefully, collectively. "And if someone forgets too much?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Finally, "Then the fields remember them completely." That night I dreamed. It shocked me so badly I woke screaming. I was standing in a field that wasn't corn. The plants were wrong, shorter, darker, whispering constantly. Faces pressed up through the soil, not screaming, just watching. And above them, lights burned in the sky like unblinking eyes. When I woke, my notebook lay open on my chest. A new section had been added. What we give to stay. Sleep willingly. Time gradually. Names carefully. Faces when necessary. Below that, a final line written shakily. New blood helps. I confronted Mrs. Calder. "I needed you," I said. "That's why I'm here." She nodded. "We don't choose who comes, but we don't turn them away. You let the fields have pieces of us so they don't take everything," I said. "Yes. And eventually?" Her eyes filled with tears she didn't bother hiding. "Eventually, we are light and notebooks and habits, and the fields stay full." That night, someone else disappeared. The teenager. His notebook lay open in the street, pages blank. The villagers stood around it in silence. No one could write his name. No one could. And in the reflection of a nearby window, I saw my face again, clearer than it had been in days. The fields were preparing me.
I began to feel lighter. Not physically. My body still ached, still dragged itself through the endless brightness, but in some deeper, more terrifying way. like a bag that had been emptied without my noticing, until only the shape remained. The notebook grew heavier in my hands. That should have told me something. I caught myself forgetting to write again. Not big things, not yet, just details. The color of my childhood bedroom, the sound of my mother's laugh, the reason I'd been driving west in the first place. When I tried to focus on those thoughts, they slid away from me, leaving behind a dull pressure, like a bruise you only notice when you press it. I wrote them down as best I could, but the words felt second-hand, rehearsed, as if I were copying from someone else's memory. The villagers noticed. They always noticed. "You're thinning," Aaron said one morning as we stood beneath the church bell. He didn't sound cruel. He sounded relieved. "What happens when there's nothing left?" I asked. He looked out toward the fields. "Then you're useful." I was invited to watch. Not the fields, never the fields, the village. There was a gathering in the largest house at the center of town, a place I hadn't entered before. The light inside was harsher than anywhere else, reflecting off pale walls stripped bare of decoration. In the middle of the room stood a chair, and beside it a stack of notebooks. "This won't hurt," Mrs. Calder said, though her voice wavered. "What is it?" I asked. "A remembering," Aaron replied.
A woman sat in the chair, elderly, small. Her hands shook so badly she had to be guided down. They began to read to her, names, places, stories, not hers, everyone else's. She listened, eyes wide, as memory after memory poured into her. Birthdays, weddings, arguments, small kindnesses. The light above flickered. The rustling outside grew loud. When it was over, the woman smiled. "I remember," she said softly, and then she stood and walked into the fields. No one stopped her. That night, my dreams returned, or maybe they never left. I stood at the edge of Harlows Field, watching figures made of light walk calmly into the rows. As they disappeared, the corn grew taller, greener, heavier. I understood then. The village didn't just feed the fields, they shaped the offering. I tried to leave again, not with my body, with my mind. I stopped writing entirely. I sat in my room, staring at the light, refusing to open the notebook, no matter how loud the rustling became. My thoughts began to fracture. Sentences ended halfway through. Faces blurred. My name felt foreign in my mouth. The fields leaned closer, and something inside me reached back. Aaron found me that evening. "You can't starve it," he said gently. "It doesn't die." "I won't become that," I said. "You already are." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "For what it's worth, you're taking longer than most." The mirror stopped working the next day, not shattering, not distorting, just refusing. I stood before it and saw only light. My reflection had nowhere left to land. When I turned away, I knew what that meant. I was no longer anchored. That night, the bell rang 4 times.
The villagers gathered without being called. Aaron stood before me, notebook open. It's time. For what? To choose what shape you leave behind. I looked at the fields. For the first time, they felt familiar, not welcoming, recognizing.
I thought the fields wanted memory. That was the lie we told ourselves because it was small enough to survive. The truth was larger, and once I saw it, there was no way to unsee it. They didn't bring me to the fields. That surprised me. Instead, they brought the fields to me. The gathering took place in the center of town, in the wide open square where the light was brightest and the shadows had nowhere to hide. The corn did not grow there, but that didn't matter anymore. The air was thick with rustling. The sound came from everywhere. Aaron stood beside me, notebook closed for once. He looked thinner than ever, his outline wavering slightly at the edges, like a figure drawn too many times and erased. "We believed it fed," he said, "that it consumed what we gave." "But it doesn't," I said. He nodded. "It remembers." The villagers formed a circle. Each of them opened their notebooks to the final page. I recognized the pattern immediately. They were all the same. Who I am now. The entries were brief, functional, reduced. Caretaker, writer, lightkeeper. Nothing about love. Nothing about fear, nothing about hope. The fields whispered louder. The corn at the edge of town leaned inward, though it still did not cross the road. "We forgot what a person was," Mrs. Calder said softly, "and in doing so, we learned what it wanted." I swallowed. "And what is that?" She looked at me with something like gratitude. A witness.
They showed me the truth. Not with words, with memory. I was not the first traveler. There had been others like me. People passing through, carrying full, unbroken selves. People who remembered too much. Felt too deeply. The fields could not take them outright, not at first. But if someone stayed long enough, forgot slowly enough, resisted just enough, the shape that remained was stable, a mind that could hold memory without dissolving into it, a person who could remember the fields. The offering was never the villagers, it was the narrator, the one who would remember for the fields, who would carry them forward, who would speak them into permanence. I felt it then. The pressure behind my eyes was no longer painful, it was focused. My memories rearranged themselves, not fading, but aligning. I remembered my life before Harlows Field with startling clarity. My childhood, my voice, why I had been driving west. I was running from something, from being seen. The irony almost made me laugh. "You'll leave," Aaron said. "Yes," I replied. "And you'll tell others?" "Yes." "You won't remember us kindly." I looked around the circle, the light, the notebooks,
the hollowed shapes of people who had survived by subtraction. "No," I said, "I won't." Aaron smiled. "Good." The fields receded that night. For the first time since my arrival, the rustling stopped. The light dimmed, not to darkness, but to shadow. I felt the road return beneath my feet, solid and real. My car sat where I'd left it. The engine started on the first turn. As I drove away, I looked back once. The sign read, "Welcome to Harlows Field. Population 311. The number was no longer scratched. I didn't write that night. I didn't need to. The fields had finished with me.
Leaving Harlows Field felt wrong. Not because I wanted to stay, because the road felt familiar, as if I had driven it before. The highway unfolded beneath my headlights in a way it hadn't on the way in. Straighter, longer, real. The radio crackled back to life somewhere outside the town limits, a low country song bleeding through static. I laughed. Out loud. The sound startled me. It had been so long since I'd heard myself react naturally that it felt borrowed, like a reflex I'd found abandoned on the side of the road. I kept driving. Mile after mile, the corn thinned, trees returned, gas stations appeared like promises kept. And yet, the pressure behind my eyes remained. Not painful, present. I slept that night, a real sleep, dreamless, heavy, healing. When I woke, I cried. Not because I was afraid, because I remembered what rest felt like. I tried to forget Harlows Field. That was my first mistake. I didn't write about it. I didn't tell anyone. I convinced myself that silence would starve it, that without words it would shrink back into nothing. Instead, the memories sharpened. Details grew clearer when I wasn't thinking about them. Faces, phrases, the texture of the notebooks, the exact pitch of the bell. I began to notice things. Small things at first. A gas station clerk who stared too long, eyes bloodshot, posture rigid beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. A motel hallway where every room glowed with the same harsh brightness, bulbs humming in perfect unison. A town sign scratched over, the population number gouged out and rewritten so many times the wood beneath showed through. I didn't stop in those places. I couldn't. My hands shook on the wheel every time. I understood my role then. Not to warn, not to save, to recognize. The fields didn't need me to drag others back. They needed me to notice when they had already arrived. I started hearing the rustling again. Not in cornfields, in crowds, in libraries, in offices late at night, in hospitals where no one slept. The sound of too many people thinking too hard, trying desperately to remember who they were, trying not to fade. I checked myself constantly. Mirrors, photos, recordings of my own voice. I stayed whole. That was the cruelest part. The fields had given me clarity as payment, perfect memory, perfect recall. I could remember every face from Harlows Field, every name, every reduction. And because I remembered them, they no longer had to. I finally wrote it down, not in a notebook, on a screen, typed, backspaced, typed again. A story about a rural village, a man passing through, lights that never went out. I told myself it was fiction, but every word felt placed, necessary, like fulfilling a promise I hadn't known I'd made. People listened. They always do. They told me it unsettled them, that it stayed with them, that they couldn't stop thinking about it afterwards. Some asked where Harlows Field was. I never answered. I didn't need to. The fields were patient. Last night I woke to the sound of rustling outside my window. Not corn, paper. I looked down at my hands. I was holding a notebook, brown leather, cracked spine. On the first page, in my handwriting, was a question I didn't remember writing. Who is remembering you? The light in the room hummed softly. Too bright.
I tried to stop. That was my last real act of defiance. I stopped writing, stopped recording, stopped telling the story in my head when I lay awake at night. I told myself that memory could be locked away, that even perfect recall could be buried under routine, noise, distraction. That was when the dreams came back. They weren't dreams the way people mean them. There was no symbolism, no distortion, just accuracy. I would fall asleep and wake up standing in places I recognized too well. A grocery store aisle lit too brightly, every bulb humming at the same pitch. People standing still, carts abandoned, eyes red, staring at shelves as if waiting for instructions. A school gymnasium where the lights never shut off, students hunched over desks, writing in notebooks they hadn't brought with them. A hospital ward where no one closed their eyes, nurses and patients alike moving slowly, carefully, afraid of losing something if they rested too deeply. In every place I heard it. The rustling, not plants, pages. I woke each time with my heart racing and my mind intact. Too intact. I remembered everything. That was the punishment. The notebook followed me now. I tried throwing it away once, left it in a trash bin at a rest stop, walked back to my car without looking. When I opened the driver's door, it was on the seat. I didn't scream. I just nodded. We understood each other by then. I opened it to the last page. The question was still there. Who is remembering you? I answered, I am. The pen didn't stop moving when I lifted my hand. More words appeared beneath it, slow and deliberate. For how long? That was when I realized the final truth. The fields didn't just need a witness, they needed continuity, a chain, each witness remembering the last,
carrying them forward like a seed planted in language instead of soil. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. I returned to Harlows Field. I didn't plan to. I just drove. The road was there when I needed it. The sign greeted me like an old friend. Welcome to Harlows Field. Population 312.
The village was quieter than I remembered. Fewer people. More light. Aaron was gone. Mrs. Calder stood behind the counter, thinner than ever, her outline faint at the edges. "You came back," she said. "I couldn't stop remembering," I replied. She nodded. "That's how we know who it will be." They didn't take me to the fields. They took me to the center of town, to a chair, to a light, to a stack of notebooks I now recognized as histories, witnesses. I sat. The light intensified. The rustling swelled. I felt memories settle into me that were not mine. The drought, the first child, the first witness who tried to burn his own words and failed. I remembered them all. "You won't stay," Mrs. Calder said. "No," I agreed. "You'll go again." "Yes, and you'll tell it." I looked down at the notebook in my hands, already thick, already heavy. "Yes," I said. When I left the second time, the road felt easier, smoother, like it had been used recently. I slept that night. I always sleep now. That's how I know I'm still useful. If you're hearing this, if you've stayed with the story this long, then I need you to understand something. I don't remember Harlow's Field anymore. Not the way I did. The details are blurring, softening, fading, which means I look down at the page. There's only one line left to write, and I don't remember writing it, but I know it's true. The fields remember you now.